The following is a lecture to college students given by Hridayananda Das Goswami on January 28, 1990 at the Los Angeles Temple.
So the idea of worship, it's not that there's this tremendous confusion that no one knows what God is or everything is God or whatever. It just means it's a sense of the sanctity of all things. It's a sense that God is not extremely remote, but God is also very much here, and that all kinds of things around us can be touched by God and can also become sanctified and holy. So it's that sense of the great possibilities for making things holy by the touch of God that leads to this concept of worshiping. So in the same way, spiritual masters worship not because we think he's God or we don't know there's only one God. We feel here's a person who was so close to God, who was so surrendered to God. In other words, by his total subservience to God, he becomes worthy of worship. Not as a competitor God or a rival to God, but because he's so completely subservient to God's will. As the Christians say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. So that sense of thy will be done is really the essence, I think, of the religious life. It's an acknowledgement that it's God's will and not our own, that really is what counts, and that we should make our will conform to God's will. Not that our will should conform to the latest billboard, the latest liquor advertisement, or the latest rock and roll song, or the latest academic theory, but that our will should actually conform to God's will, and that if someone is actually able to purely transmit God's will and follows, not a hypocrite, we discussed that point, but he actually follows, then that person is also divine. So the idea is that in the spiritual world, everyone really loves everyone else, no one is envious of anyone else, and everyone is godly, although only one person is God. So there's this very generous spirit of honoring other holy persons. That generosity is actually, because we don't feel threatened in our monotheism, we don't feel that somehow this could erode our comprehension that there's only one God.
Could you say a few things about the organization?
Sure.
Sociologists like things like organization.
We have a joke among ourselves that our movement is a proof. How do they say it? They say that anyone that knows us would never accuse us of being an organized religion.
Quakers have the same joke.
Oh yeah. So we have a system which Prabhupada left us, which is that there are about 30, you might call them commissioners or secretaries, who are responsible for the management of the society. We use the word GBC, the letters, which stand for Governing Body Commission. So there's 30 such individuals, and they meet once a year in Mayapur, India, Holy Land in East India. And then each secretary, GBC secretary, has a particular responsibility. Most of them have geographic responsibilities to oversee our activities in different areas. And then some have other portfolios. For example, one friend of mine is in charge of public affairs or public relations, whatever word you're supposed to use. And another one is in charge of education, and so on. So there are some areas like that, ministries or whatever you want to call them. But most of the responsibilities are geographic.
How many countries? Well, first you might say something about the Guru tradition, because there Prabhupada had a teacher, and there are other groups here descended from cousin, right? They would be cousin societies.
Yeah, you brought up a very important point. There is what is called Paramatma, which means in Sanskrit a succession. And this is the word which Krishna uses in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Evam parampara prapta. So prapta means received through parampara. Parampara means that the original guru means teacher, by the way. It just means teacher.
Like rabbi.
Yeah. But, well...
Rabbi means teacher, too.
Yeah, then this is so, what I meant to say is it doesn't only mean priest. There are other words for priest. those who perform ceremonies and so on and so forth. But guru specifically means teacher. And it literally, the literal meaning, one literal meaning in Sanskrit is heavy, because a guru is supposed to be heavy with knowledge. So it's just, that's just the word for heavy. Whoops, sorry. That's it. So, the idea is the original guru is, and who else could it be? God. Because the original teacher has to be God. That seems self-evident to us. In other words, it's only because of God's own enthusiasm to teach us as His children that others also get that enthusiasm. You know, you have to get the bug from somewhere. So it's originally God's own enthusiasm to educate His children, like, you know, our parents wanted us to go to college. So God also wants His kids to be educated and not be ignorant and not be foolish, and ultimately to go back to Him. So God is the original teacher. There's even a statement in the first verse of the Bhagavatam, another great scripture. It says, Tene Brahma Rida Yadi Goye, that Krishna first imparted Vedic knowledge to Brahma, who's supposed to be the creator, like the, what is it called, demiurge of Plato, more or less the engineer of the universe, as opposed to supreme being. So, anyway, God is the original teacher, and then it's held that He taught Brahma, the creator of the universe, although not God. And then Brahma taught Narada, his son, a great sage. Narada taught Vyas, who wrote the Vedic literature down. So the idea is that scriptures, in order to be legitimate, must come from God. The teaching must come from God. And so a teacher or a guru who's in that succession is held to be bona fide or authentic. The idea that a teacher can just imagine something and create something, that's considered to be very tawdry and a cheap imitation of real thing. Brand X. The idea is that it actually has to come down.
And Prabhupada is in one of those lines.
Yes, absolutely.
And there are other gurus in a similar line.
Yeah, there are other gurus in the same line even. So there are four. Now in India, there's a big division between the personal and impersonal school. Is anyone too hot in here? Everything's all right. So we have climate control. It's open window. Anyway, the idea is that there's most people actually in India understand that there ultimately is a personal God. There is a very esoteric, mystic school that says that no, there is no personal God. They're the ones that say that I am it, and it is you or we, and that you can't describe with words, although they still write books, and deny the personality of God. But ultimately, there are descriptions of God as a person in all the literature, and I give you many references for that in the Upanishad, the Gita. That's all there is really, and. So among the personal schools, among those who accept that God is a spiritual, infinite person, there are four main lines coming down, they're called sampradayas. The process of descending is parampara, and then a particular line is called a sampradaya, a particular party or group is coming down. So there are basically four in the personal school. There are basically four sampradayas. Now we are one of those four sampradayas. And we are the one which is most active in the world today, which is really sort of running with the ball, so to speak. In fact, when we travel around India, the other leaders, the other sampradayas, they really sort of look to us and depend upon us, and they're very open and verbal about that. They're sort of rooting for us. And so we're one of those four. Then within our sampradaya, one of the main figures is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared 500 years ago. We accept as Krishna himself. And so Prabhupada is in that specific line. So in that Chaitanya, or Gaudiya line coming down, of course, there are different gurus. But again, for example, Prabhupada, as we say, God brother, meaning brothers of the same guru, called God brothers. So Prabhupada's most prominent God brother in the world was Sridhar Swami. You may have heard some of all that stuff. So the last time I saw that Sridhar Swami, just several months before he passed away in India, I was part of a delegation from our governing committee that went to see him. And he openly told us, he said, actually everything depends on you, everything depends on ISKCON. So please don't mess it up, because everything depends on you. So really, I think there's not very much controversy about that among authoritative people. There's not much controversy that this ISKCON is really sort of the trunk of the tree, the branches.
Well, how many countries is this gone? And how many countries is this gone?
Most of them. Most of them. It's all over what used to be the communist world. And we're in China, we're pretty much, I don't know if we're in South Yemen yet, but I know we have books in Albania. That's pretty far.
And how large is the organization here?
In Los Angeles?
In the United States.
I'd say it's, the organization is, I don't know what type of units to use.
Pick any.
As far as the number of people whose lives we affect on a regular basis, or who look to us as a type of clergy or whatever, I would say it's definitely hundreds of thousands. There's been, in sociological terms, a marked shift in the last several years, which many religions have experienced, and that is that because in America nowadays, unfortunately, because of what I have to call, I think, a wave of materialism, despite all the nice things that are going on, and we've also recognized that we're not doomsday prophets, but there is a wave of materialism. And because of that, religion as a vocation has declined in popularity. People like the idea in general that, religion's kind of a neat thing and God is a neat thing. But as far as actually taking it up as a vocation, like, what do you do in life? Well, I'm a religious person, or I have a religious vocation. That's very much declined across the board. And so because of that, I'd say the average age of our members has gone up a little bit. It's still basically the same generation, running with the ball, as it was back in the late 60s and early 70s, only now we're all older. So, at the same time, Krishna consciousness, while being affected by the decline in religion as a vocation in general in the United States, there's just like a lot of people out there who chant Hare Krishna, read our books, or who sort of orient themselves and understand the universe basically through our literature and practices. That's their main tool for understanding themselves and the world. And it's their more or less, to whatever extent they have religious affiliation, this is it.
So there'd be several hundred thousand in the congregations.
Yes, definitely.
Clergy? Devotees.
Yeah. As far as because people are getting older now, there's also a lot of people who consider themselves to be priests or clergy or preachers, whatever you want, but they don't live necessarily in a communal setting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's natural. You just like, when you're young, sometimes you live in a dormitory or go away to school. When you get older, you got your own place. So as the age increases, that also affects people's propensities for communal lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you extend the definition of a priest or whatever to include people that aren't, as they used to all be, more or less in the communal lifestyle, then I think you would say there's probably 1,000 or 2,000 clergy in America.
I wanted you to describe a bit what it's like to be a devotee.
A day in the life?
A day in the life. And also how one becomes a devotee and what kind of paths there are, what kind of options there are, and so on and so on.
The first thing is early to bed, early to rise. That I think in general to seriously practice spiritual life, it's very important to do as we do and as most people used to do, to get to bed early and get up early. Follow the sun, so to speak. And we try to get up by 4 o'clock in the morning, which frightens a lot of people. Although it's really neat because you have a whole planet to yourself. In the sense that it's very peaceful, it's very quiet, all the passionate, aggressive, greedy people are sleeping, or almost all of them. And the atmosphere is very serene. It's a very serene, sublime atmosphere. It's easy to meditate. You don't get many phone calls at that time. And not a lot of planes and helicopters overhead. And you can actually do your spiritual thing. So to get up early, you have to get to bed early. And actually, the midnight hour is not so appealing to those who are religious, really into spiritual life. They're not into the midnight hour. So we get to bed early. 10 o'clock, for example, for us, that's like our bedtime, the latest. And we get up early. We take 3 baths a day. We hold that people, to keep very clean, should take bath. When you get up, after sleeping, get up, take a bath. And then after working half the day, at noontime, you take a bath before you eat lunch. It really feels good once you get into it. You take a shower, a bath, whatever. You get yourself all clean. We mark our bodies with the sacred clay and say the names of God, like to sanctify the body, make the body as God's temple. And then and then in the evening, after you finish your day's work, take a bath in the evening before you go to bed. So we take bath. Anyway, we get up at 4, take a bath, get ourselves ready. Then at 4:30, between 4:30 and 5:30, depending on there's some flexibility, we have what we call Mongol Arti. Arti is a ceremony you'll see in a few minutes. And Mongol, there's different artis. There's the Mongol Arti, the Sundar Arti, this Arti, that Arti. In other words, the ceremony is different times of the day. So the first one is called Mongol, because Mongol means, not like the Mongol horse. Mongol means, in Sanskrit, auspicious, happy. The idea is that if you start your day with a bang like that, you get up real early and worship God the first thing, early in the morning, your whole day, you're way up there. The whole day you're just really happy and you sort of float over all the stuff that's going on down there. You'll feel just real good and happy and solid all day because you started your day right. So that's called Mongol Arti. After Mongol Arti, we have a few other little things, chant this and that. It's a lot of fun once you get to know what it's all about. And then we have our individual meditation with these bead bags, which generally arouse some curiosity. This is something like the Catholic Rosary. It's the same basic idea, I'm sure. A lot of traditions in India, and also Western religious traditions, carry beads because it's just a very easy, convenient way to count how many times you've chanted the name of God or Mary or Jesus or Krishna or whatever. Just like, let's say you're a swimmer or any kind of athlete, you do like 20 jumping jacks or 5 laps, or it's not just anything you feel like. Or in school, the teacher tells the students, read so many pages, or little kids, write this 10 times. Or your piano teacher tells you, do the scale in C 12 times. So anyway, the idea is that any type of serious endeavor, discipline, enterprise requires regulation, discipline. Otherwise, you just don't get things done. So also in spiritual life, it's supposed to be regulated and disciplined. That's very important. Not drudgery and slavery, just good old-fashioned discipline, like you're trying out for the Olympics. So we chant 16 times around these beads. There's 108 beads, and we chant 16 times around. It takes about 2 hours, an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on whether you're in the fast lane, fast chanting lane, or the middle lane, or the slow lane. So after that, we have a ceremony where we greet the deities again downstairs. Very beautiful ceremony, open the curtains and we bow down, and then we have a class. We discuss philosophy for a half hour to an hour every morning. Try not to be dogmatic or fanatical. We try to learn philosophy. And after that we have breakfast. And after breakfast everyone does whatever they do. Some people, those who are married, most people that are married have to get some funds. They have a wife and children. They have to get some money. Of course, those who are very much priestly in nature, they may be subsidized. I think every religion subsidizes their priests. So, but the married people generally do different things to maintain their household. And then those who aren't married, I'm not married, I was married, but not now. I'm you might say a priest or whatever. Although a priest can be married also. A man or a woman can be a priest, and married or unmarried can be a priest. But because I'm not married, I have the luxury of not having to worry about those things. So I don't have to feed anyone out except my own, and that generally somehow not so difficult. So we all do what we do. I mean, in this movement, there's all kinds of people. It's not that just intellectuals or just simple people or just businessmen or just, in other words, sociologically, several years ago, some sociologists tried to really pin us down. Is it just like, is it this kind of people or that kind of people?
Which one? They tried to pin you down. Did you happen to know?
I don't remember. It was sort of, in other words, it's a typical thing that goes on in the, quote unquote, scientific community, that you start with your thesis and then get the facts. You start.
The reason I ask is I know most of these people.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't Stilson Judah.
No.
But, he had a hunch that, I think the basic premise they began from it was a reductionistic material view of reality, that basically all there is in life is just, atoms and molecules, and then you have consciousness as an epiphenomenon, and then consciousness can only be explained in terms of material conditioning, and as far as God and the soul, that's just, something people delude themselves with based on certain material conditions. It's funny, in the social sciences, religion used to be seen as a useless myth. Now it's been upgraded to a useful myth, which is very interesting. So at least now we hold a useful myth, which is encouraging.
The article by Durkheim, for example.
Yeah. So anyway, we hold a useful myth. And so anyway, so that idea that there must be some, just like, why does water boil? There's a reason for it. So why do people boil into religion? Why do people become, there must be some material reason for it, because they didn't love their mother, or they loved their father too much, or they didn't have a father, or this. There must be some material reason. It's not because there's a God and a soul and they click together. There must be some material reason for it. So that's not true. Although some people do become religious for material reasons, that's not the ultimate. It's one thing to approach God for material reason. I'm suffering, I'm poor, this and that. But once you actually make contact with God, that which sustains the relationship is not necessarily material, because the relationship can be transformed. You can approach God for money, and then finally figure out what you really want is God and not money, for example. So anyway, what I meant to say is, in our movement, there's all kinds of people. Really, you really do see it all, even inside. You see all kinds of people. Just everything. Every conceivable kind of person you find. So, after breakfast, everyone just, it's like when you say break in the huddle, everyone just goes and everyone has their own position and service, and everyone just goes and does what they're supposed to do. So then in the evening, we have some other spiritual activity. And that's a typical day. Excuse me.
I noticed a painting downstairs with this lion or whatever with a lot of serpents and arms up and gouging out some lady's stomach.
Oh, that was a man.
Oh, I was wondering what was the significant meaning about
Sure.
that.
That's supposed to be an incarnation of Krishna, of God.
Which one? The one doing the gouging or the one
Yeah,
being gouged?
the one that's winning. The idea is that God has all the personal qualities. And so anger also comes from God, although God's anger is pure. It's not, we get angry sometimes just because, like let's say we're driving on the road and someone does something in front of us that we always do. We say, you jerk, you like that. But it's something we always do too. I've noticed that we do that. So God's anger is pure. And the story behind it is that once there was a 5-year-old boy who was a pure devotee of the Lord. He actually reached pure enlightenment, pure love of God. And he was completely absorbed in the love of God. His father was a great demon. He actually was a very evil person that used to massacre people. And he was just, sort of like a Vedic version of Hitler, only on a cosmic level. So he was a very wicked person. And because his son loved God, he decided to murder his son. So he tried in every conceivable way to murder his son, threw him off a cliff, cut him with a knife, poisoned him. Everything he tried to do, God saved him. He got thrown off a cliff, and so he landed like a feather. And then his father gave him poisoned food. But he just, as usual, offered his food to God, so when he ate it, there was no effect, because the food was sanctified. So his father, for no other reason than the son loved God, kept trying to kill him. And finally, the Lord couldn't tolerate it anymore, so the father was in a frenzy because he couldn't kill his son. He was losing it completely. And so he said to his son, where do you get this power? And he said, from the same place you get your power, Father, from God. So then he went completely berserk. And then he screamed out, where is this God? I'll kill your God. He was a very powerful person. And then the father said, is God in this pillar of the palace? And so his son, 5-year-old boy, said, of course God is all pervading, so he's also in the pillar. So at that, this demon cried out, then I'll kill your God. He took out a sword and smashed the pillar, and then the Lord appeared in that incarnation and actually ripped apart the demon. It's interesting that at that point, he said, the Lord said to this little boy, Prahlad, that I'll give you whatever you want, because you love me so much, I'll give you any blessing you want. So then the boy said, then please just save my father. Let him also go to heaven. So then the father was also saved. So it has a happy ending. Everyone got saved again.
Okay, why don't we allow to point out
That's an honest question. The idea is that, it's culture. It's part of the Vedic culture. The feet, just like if you kick someone, it's like, let's say I wanted to get your attention. If I tapped your shoulder, just said, hey you, it would be nicer than kicking you. So the idea is that the feet, because the feet walk on the ground, there's a lot of dirt down there and everything, that you don't step on someone or point your feet. It's part of the Indian culture. That's also why we take our shoes off, because, there's all kinds of chewing gum and other things worse than chewing gum out there. And so, because we're walking around on it, the idea is that your house or the temple, whatever, is kept very pure and clean. And also, not pointing the feet is a way of showing respect. It's actually a very beautiful culture. Alexander liked it. A lot of this culture, Alexander the Great, a lot of this culture, of course, was in the old Persian Empire because of their close ties with the Indian civilization. In fact, without going into all, the whole thing of the language base and all that, but there was a lot of connection, a lot of the old, those grand old Mid-Eastern empires that the Greeks always had to contend with. A lot of that culture, which, they were doing different things with it, but it was coming originally from India. So when Alexander conquered the Persian Empire, he became fascinated, isn't it, with that Eastern luxuriance and culture and worship and everything. He thought it was neat. So he wanted to introduce it. And I think he encouraged his men to intermarry with Eastern girls. He actually wanted to achieve a type of synthesis. He died. It's interesting. Of course, we can speculate what would have happened. But, so these types of things, it's actually a very great culture. It's a very beautiful thing. And that's just one of the little aspects of it.
Could you say something about the position of women in the movement?
Yeah, that's a timely topic of the day. Women, okay, I'll start from the spiritual part of it. From the spiritual point of view, there's no difference. The body is a covering. So in a philosophy, in a civilization which is really based on the idea that the body is not the self, obviously, spiritually, everyone is seen as the same. Because now you're a woman, in your next life you could be a man, or maybe your last life you were. I could have been a woman, or maybe I will be. So it's just different dress. But because we are conditioned by the body, in other words, whatever type of body we have conditions us. It makes us desire in certain ways, and think in certain ways. Therefore, there are different duties given according to what type of body you have. But without the stigma, without the idea that that's what you really are. So all the attitudes toward women or men are all based on trying to get people self-realized, trying to get them out of the mire of just thinking like a dog or a cat thinks, and I'm just a physical body, and that's what I am, and understand that actually I'm a spiritual being, I'm an eternal being. So it's said that women are like fire, men are like butter. When you combine butter and fire, the butter melts, despite all good intentions. So this whole issue of sexuality is very significant in how women are dealt with. Because just as love of God is the most powerful spiritual impulse, as Christ also pointed out, similarly the most powerful material impulse, as people like Freud pointed out, is a sexual impulse. It's perhaps the most powerful material impulse. And a lot of times it really is at loggerheads with the spiritual impulse. So how to deal with sex? Obviously, if you repress yourself, then you'll just, pop out in some way to become, climb up in a bell tower and shoot people or something. So you don't want to just frustrate yourself. At the same time, you can't go hog wild. So how to deal with your own sexuality? And I would say that attitude towards women are almost like a subset of rules which really come out of a broader concern of how to deal with human sexuality so that people don't go nuts, become totally frustrated, but at the same time they transcend lust and actually become spiritual beings. So because men and women really, it's butter and fire, therefore there's separation except in marriage. Except in marriage. If someone wants to get married, they get married, they can have 30 kids if they want. But otherwise, there's separation. Women are also, there's a great concern with protecting women from exploitation, which is basically the same concern of a lot of people nowadays. But I think the Vedic system is much better. All these different ways in which people are attempting nowadays to stop exploitation, I don't think are really working. I don't think it's really changing anything. At least not the billboards I see or the dress styles I see or what seems to be happening. I don't think anything's really changing. And so I think the Vedic system is much more effective. The Vedic system of stopping exploitation is based on the concept that a woman should be married. The man shouldn't be a jerk. The man should have a certain amount of culture and education. The man should see his wife as a spiritual being. And to see your wife as a spiritual being means that you have to try to help her become enlightened. And so there's a whole set of cultural rules. So basically women are seen as human beings that have to be enlightened. They have to achieve enlightenment, and everything should be done so they do achieve enlightenment. But that unless men and women, unless sexuality is dealt with successfully, you'll get a very materialistic, gross, vulgar society like one we live in today, where people just basically are suing each other in different ways.
So are you saying that women don't become enlightened unless they get married?
No, I wouldn't say that. There are many women that were enlightened and not married. But in general, women are married because that's seen as the best way, the most efficient way on a large scale to protect them. For example, take the women's rights movement in America, which is ultimately, it's changed certain types of superficial aspects of our culture. But to a great extent, people remain very materialistic. And as long as people remain very materialistic, they basically exploit each other. So if you have a movement aimed at, let's say, women aren't able to exploit as much as men. Men are exploiting the whole planet. They're just, the men have gone hog wild, and America in general is sort of destroying the planet in their attempt to, open new markets or whatever. So now the women say, we're not exploiting as much. I mean, a man was justified on the basis that sex is natural. That was really the bottom line, sex is natural. But, natural doesn't just refer to below the belt. It has to be natural above the belt also. So if you have sex, the natural thing is to produce a child. It's not natural to have sex and not procreate. That's not natural. I mean, just the sheer shamelessness of the hypocrisy of saying I can have sex because it's natural, and I use a birth control device that came out of some chemical laboratory. The hypocrisy of it is staggering. So let's say you have sex, and then you have a child, because you're natural. Then it's also been proven, there was just a conference at Stanford in which they were saying that divorce is a fiasco, it's a disaster, it's just the worst thing that happened. The same liberal human counselors that were telling everyone before, if you need it for your self-improvement, for your personal growth, go ahead and get a divorce, hug your kid a few extra times every week. It's a big failure, because children do need a solid home. Divorce ruins children, it's not good for them, it's a traumatic experience. So it turns out that a husband and wife that stay together, that's also natural. So it turns out, lo and behold, that having sex within marriage to produce children in a religious marriage, that turns out to be natural sex. Because if you want to say nature is just below the belt, no, nature is above the belt. Your brain has to be natural, psychologically natural, socially natural, not just, below the belt natural. So it turns out that the old-fashioned thing where get married. It's a religious thing. You're not just marrying like dogs. They sniff each other. You don't just sniff a man or a man sniffs a woman and get married. And then when they don't smell good, you divorce. It's not a question of that. It's a question of that I'm willing to accept this person for the rest of my life, and we'll work together at self-realization. That's marriage. That's actually human marriage, as opposed to dogs sniffing each other. So then, you get married, and you have children, and you take care of them in a stable home. That's natural sex. So, therefore, women get married. And most men get married, because otherwise, you're not going to be able to deal with sexuality naturally. The sexual revolution has unleashed perverted sex on the world, where there's no responsibility, there's no stability, there's no underlying values. The sex isn't integrated with your spiritual being. It's just, it feels good, so do it. So a totally integrated, totally synthesized natural sex means, it's the old-fashioned thing. So therefore, unless you deal with sexuality in a way that's compatible with spiritual life, people will never stop exploiting each other. It's absurd. So that's basically the attitude towards women.
We should probably go downstairs.
Yeah, I don't want to. Anyway, thank you very much. Enjoyed talking to all of you, and have a good time.
The following is a Bhagavad Gita class, Chapter 15, Text 17, given by Sri Dayananda Das Goswami on February 4th, 1990, in Los Angeles, California.
So we're going to read a verse from Bhagavad Gita, as it is. Translations and purports are by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, founder of our movement and the spiritual authority of our movement. So this Gita is written originally in Sanskrit. First we'll chant or recite responsibly the verse, and then read the purport. So, please repeat, Uttama, Purusha, Tu, Anya, Paramatma, Iti, Udahritaha, Jaha, Loka, Trayam, Avisha, Vibharati, Avyaya, Isharaha, Uttama Purushastanyak Paramatmeti Udharita Jo Loka Trayamavisha Vibharati Avyaya Isharaha. So the translation is as follows. Besides these two, which I'll explain what the two are. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. Purport. This is Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse. The idea of this verse is very nicely expressed in the Katha Upanishad and Shetashatara Upanishad. It is clearly stated there that above the innumerable living entities, some of whom are conditioned and some of whom are liberated, there is the Supreme Personality who is Paramatma. The Upanishadic verse runs as follows. Nityo Nityanang Chaitanas Chaitananang. The purport is that amongst all the living entities, both conditioned and liberated, there is one supreme living personality, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who maintains them and gives them all the facility of enjoyment according to different work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. A wise man who can understand him is eligible to attain perfect peace, not others. Om Jnanatamidandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshuru Militang Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master opened my eyes to the torch of knowledge. Therefore I offer him my most respectful obeisances. So I've chosen this verse tonight because today we're celebrating the disappearance day of a great Acharya, or great spiritual authority named Madhvacharya. We say disappearance day, and also for the birth of a great soul we say the appearance day, to distinguish their appearance in this world from that of ordinary persons like ourselves who are simply born and die pretty much in ignorance. We are certainly born in ignorance. No one is born enlightened. Everyone is born without knowledge. They have to be educated. And generally we pass our life concerned mostly with our body. And we may have some vague intuition that there is something beyond the body, but we never get around to it completely and never understand it fully. It remains a type of tantalizing or vague higher dimension. But anyway, the great teachers are persons who actually are in full knowledge. They are enlightened. And so their appearance and disappearance in this world is not like ours. So we say their appearance day and their disappearance day rather than saying the day they died. Because the idea is that through their teachings, which are supposed to be Sanatan Dharma, eternal principles, universal principles, they continue to live in this world. So, Madhvacharya appeared in this world in South India. He lived in a city called Udupi, which is just south of Mangalore, isn't it?
No.
Just north. Yeah, just a short, just a little bit north of Mangalore on the southwest coast of India, just north of Mangalore. Anyway, Madhvacharya is very famous among those who are familiar with the Vedic culture of India. He's a great Acharya, a great spiritual authority, a person who changed the course of spiritual history, religious history. And his symbol is an upraised hand with two fingers, which of course is a victory sign in our culture. And it was also for him, but it also meant that there are two fundamental entities. He held up two fingers like this. There's God and ourselves. And there's a relationship. The relationship is called yoga. That's what the word yoga means. Yoga means conjunction or linking. So linking what? Conjunction of what? Of ourselves, souls, and the Supreme Soul God. So at the time of Madhva, there was a predominance of impersonal philosophy. Impersonal philosophy meaning that in the ultimate issue, when we are finally liberated from all illusion and we come back to our pure and eternal state, we aren't persons. There aren't any persons. What we now recognize as individual existence or personal existence is simply a hallucination, and when we are liberated, that hallucination is gone, just like a dream that you wake up from. And as far as God is concerned, there is no supreme entity over and above other entities. There's just one spiritual mass of energy. So this is the impersonal idea. It was very predominant at that time. It still has its following. And Madhvacharya defeated this idea. He defeated this idea by explaining that if we are God, if in fact it is only due to illusion that we think we are not God, or we think we are something else, then we are faced with the irreconcilable problem of how God became illusion. Because if there is nothing but God, and we ourselves are God, then there could not be illusion, because illusion would be a second thing. Not only would illusion be a second thing, but it would appear to be a better thing, or a more powerful thing, because it actually has faked out God. So how God can be faked out, how God can become ignorant so that God has to go to a yoga school and brush up again in his divinity. This really cannot be explained. There are many things that cannot be explained with impersonal philosophy. Now, of course, from our point of view, some of us may say, well, who cares? It's all beautiful, it's all neat. Impersonal, personal. Why be so fussy about it? Why, argue about it? So, just like take the example of a person who's sick or who's in a lot of pain and just wants to get out of that pain. So they just want the pain to stop. What the doctor does, how he does it, I don't care so much. Some people don't even care what the side effects are going to be or what I'm going to look like when it's all over. Just like, for example, nowadays for certain types of cancer, they use some types of radiation, which cause all kinds of undesirable effects. But people are so anxious to get rid of their disease, they're willing to accept really terrible side effects and so on. So it's something like that. In our present condition, we have gone so low. We are so much conditioned and so ignorant of so many important things that we'll just sort of take what we can get, and anything which will lift us above material ignorance seems to be a beautiful thing, and why quibble about it? So it's not just a question of quibbling, but it's a question of what do we ultimately look like when we become completely free from all ignorance. What is our eternal identity? And what is God? These things are actually not minor issues. Especially because, granted that there is a personal God, and that is why we are personal, and we are personal. No matter how much we may try to be impersonal by meditation or by self-denial or by just making up our minds we're not going to be persons. Actually, we are people, and we always bounce back. The example, it's like those clowns where you punch them and they always bounce back up, they pop back up. So no matter how many punches you take at this idea of being a person, no matter how much you try not to be a person, you'll bounce back up and be a person. You'll walk out of the yoga studio, and 5 minutes later, you're yelling at someone, or you're desiring something, or you're trying to do something. Because we're actually people, so you can't suppress that. You can't pretend you're not a person or meditate yourself out of the fact that you are a person. And we are people because God is a people. God is a person. And to be a person is not bad. There's an interesting concept, especially in this century, which is revealed by a certain verbal phenomenon or linguistic phenomenon, that we use the word ego. We say that, he has a lot of ego. That's just his ego, or that's egotism. Now, ego just means to be an individual person, to have a sense of I am something. So we have given a negative connotation to ego. Ego is not really bad, though. Therefore, we use the term false ego, because ego in and of itself is not a negative thing. But false ego is bad. Now, when you say I am, how you fill it in, the blank, I am what? What are you? That depends on what kind of ego you're dealing with. Someone may say, I'm an American. Someone may say, I am a stamp collector. Someone may say, I'm the president. Someone may say, I'm an aardvark. Or I'm Chinese, or I'm this or that. I'm a female, I'm a male. I'm old, I'm young. I'm an intellectual. I'm a truck driver. I'm a plumber. So, how you fill that in? Ultimately, we should fill it in that I am an eternal servant of God. That's actually our eternal identity. But if we fill anything else in, if we put anything else in that blank, it's called false ego. Even if I say I am a yogi, I am a philosopher, that's also false. I'm not eternally a yogi. It's not that when you go back to the spiritual world, you do exercises, breathing exercises, or sitting postures in the spiritual world. So that's not eternal. That's a means, but it's not eternal. So if you say that I'm eternal servant of God, that's really right on the money. And the whole reason that we're in this material world, the whole reason that we have these bodies and that we're getting old and dying and so much anxiety and fear is because we don't like that. We don't like it, and we're trying to be something else. That's really all that's going on down here in this whole universe. Even if you go to other planets, any planet you like, what to speak of anywhere on this planet, you're only going to find one thing. People basically trying to pretend there's something else besides eternal servant of God. And you'll find some few people who are figuring out that they really are servants of God and trying to understand what that means. Or trying to somehow get back in touch with their own real nature. So there are different ways in which we try to avoid our subservience to God. One of the ways is by claiming that we are God. Just like back in the late 60s when we were engaged in political demonstrations, the idea was that power to the people, we are the people. In other words, there's no other authority beyond us. We ourselves are the authority. So this is more or less the technique in the impersonal school, that you don't have to surrender to God, you don't have to be subservient to God, because you are God. So isn't that silly that you were thinking of serving God when actually you are God? Now, this idea we have that service is undesirable. The last thing in the world anyone wants to be is a servant. A servant is an extremely negative word in our culture. That's why even in America, if you want to get a personal servant, someone to clean your house, you have to get a foreigner, isn't it? I mean, you can't get an American. An American really doesn't want to do that. You have to get someone from some other country. You just want someone to come and do personal service. So in our culture, it's so ingrained. We think that to be a servant, that goes back to more primitive times in history when there was rampant exploitation of social classes and people were unenlightened. They were, in historical oblivion, and they allowed other people to exploit them, and they actually agreed to call themselves servants or whatever. So we have this idea, just like that American flag, "Don't tread on me." So this is very, very deeply ingrained in us, that don't be a servant, be a master. Be your own man, be your own woman. And we think this is somehow freedom. This is what it means to be successful in life. Of course, freedom is not an independent term. It requires some correlative term. In other words, what are you free from? If you're not free from something, then if you just say, I'm not free, not that I'm free from anything, I'm just free. So to be just free and not to be free from something is difficult to understand. The word actually requires some further elaboration. So what are we free from? We somehow have the idea that we're free from this humiliation or free from this misery, this wretched condition of having to serve other people. And therefore, even the idea of serving God, like the Pope, for example, in the Catholic religion, if he issues a statement condemning our personal gratification, like, for example, if the Pope says that people shouldn't have extramarital sex, or they should just control the size of the family just by self-control and things like that, then immediately his popularity drops like anything. They show polls, in the newspaper that the Pope just said that people shouldn't use birth control devices, they should just control themselves, and immediately his approval rating goes way down. So the idea is that even God has no right, or someone who claims to be God's representative has no right to restrict our personal gratification, our personal enjoyment. Now, is this concept we have of ourselves realistic? We have a very lofty idea of who we are in the universe, that even God or God's representatives cannot restrict us, that each one of us really just should create his own philosophy, and we have all these ideas. So are these ideas realistic? Do these ideas really reflect our actual position in the universe? So we would say that they don't. That these ideas are actually artificially inflated and based on a misconception of what will actually satisfy the soul. That the soul will not be satisfied by predominating, but the soul is satisfied by submission, by loving submission. Anyway, this is the philosophy of devotion. How this whole attempt we have, in other words, it's not axiomatically true. It's not self-evident in philosophical language. It's not self-evident that it's better to predominate than to submit. We hold this practically, virtually axiomatically, that we don't even really discuss it because everyone's just supposed to know it. It's self-evident that it is better to predominate than not to be predominated, not to submit. That there's more nobility, dignity, happiness, meaningfulness in controlling, predominating, rather than being predominated. But this actually is not axiomatically true. It's not axiomatically true. If there is a supreme person, or God, or supreme being, or any name you use, if there is a supreme person who is infinitely attractive and infinitely good, then it is understandable that submission to that supremely benevolent, supremely beautiful, supremely pleasurable entity would actually be a source of far greater pleasure than simply trying to predominate this universe. As science is doing, for example, now. I mean, that's the whole thrust of modern science. This whole system of empirical knowledge is based on the underlying assumption, which is not a good one, that the way you get knowledge is by controlling, by predominating. That you get knowledge by predominating. Therefore, in the controlled experiment which characterizes modern science, the scientist is over and above the experiment. He's watching it, he's controlling it, he's establishing certain conditions, and he maintains a certain type of objectivity by his control. And therefore he extracts certain answers from nature. The universe is seen as a passive entity. It's just there, it's there to go, and let's go get it. And the more industrious you are, the more experiments you conduct, the more power you get over nature. And the more power you have over nature, the more knowledge you get, the more knowledge you get, the more power you get. So this is the model. This is the model, and we are very much affected by that model. I mean, that's, of course, obviously in terms of the environment and all those issues, I think the relationship is very obvious. This misconception that human beings are meant to dominate the universe, they're meant to dominate the earth, that real knowledge, objective knowledge, is only acquired by domination through the controlled experiment, and that in terms of religion is concerned, that religion We should also dominate the religious field. We should create our own philosophy. We should establish our own rules. We should not ultimately submit to God, even if it requires too much self-discipline, because ultimately even God should not interfere with our attempt to enjoy this world. So this is the whole ethos, or this is the whole spirit, the whole mood of the century, to dominate the earth, to dominate everything, to leave our imprint on everything, whether it's religion or science or education or whatever it may be, the human being as a center of reality. So I think this is a somewhat monstrous misconception. It's actually a little demonic when you really think about it. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that this is a mentality of the godless person. Not that anyone, I'm sure not that anyone here or there, anywhere is like the absolutely bad, but at least we can recognize what the absolute bad is, so we can shy away from it. But Krishna says, Isharoham aham bhogi, I am the Lord, I am the enjoyer. Siddho aham, I'm perfect. There are philosophies nowadays that, just realize that you're perfect. It's not as important to actually become perfect. That requires a lot of work. Just realize you are perfect, which is, the shortcut. Siddho aham balavan, I am very powerful. Sukhi, I am very happy. And so on. So, this idea that I'm the Lord, I'm the enjoyer, this is the archetypical notion which brings us to this material world. And so, if we want to eliminate the effect, we have to eliminate the cause. So if you want to eliminate the effect of being in anxiety, fearful, having a material body, growing old, dying, all these things, you have to eliminate the cause. The cause is this mentality. That why should I surrender to God when I myself am God? Why should I serve God's pleasure? I should just do whatever feels good for me. Now, there's a very nice analogy which is given by the great teachers like Madhvacharya. It actually comes from the ancient scriptures. Jathataror mulani sechanena tripyanti tatskanda bujopasaka. This means that just as by watering the root of a tree, you water the whole tree. You'll find in the Vedic literature the metaphors and analogies are very nice and wholesome, macro metaphors. So it's that just as by watering the root of a tree, you water the whole tree. Now imagine a person who thought, well, why should I favor the root of the tree? Every part of the tree should have equal rights. Therefore, he climbs up on the tree with a little squirt gun or whatever, little water squirter, and starts individually spraying each leaf, each twig, thinking that in this way he's actually, that in the past people were primitive, they just gave all the water to the root, exploiting the other parts of the tree. But now we're actually going to spray every leaf and twig. Of course, what will happen is the tree won't get any water. Because the tree is made in such a way that the tree drinks through its feet, actually, its roots. There's a nice word for tree in Sanskrit, padapa, which means literally a foot drinker. So the tree actually drinks through its foot, through its roots. So you just put all the water there. The other example that is given is pranopahara jithendriyana. We have all the senses in the body, so you don't take, you don't take your meal, like we're going to have a nice meal now, you don't take your meal and rub it all over your body because you think, well, I need nourishment all over, so I'm just going to rub it all over. Rub all the food. No, you put all the food in your stomach, and the food goes to your whole body. There's a distribution system, that's the point. So in the same way, if we want happiness and we want to help other people, help ourselves, the distribution system is that you give your service to God. You try to understand what God wants. As the Christians say, there's a very nice prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. So this really, I think, hits a nail on the head. This is really the essence of service. Thy will be done. That's really what it's all about. So if we can somehow or other please God, then His pleasure will be distributed to the whole society.